Sure, you can do all sorts of work to make sure that the game is free of bugs, but what if the player just can't figure out how to start a match with their friends? User experience, or UX, focuses on making games intuitive and accessible for players so that they can focus on the game. Our next speaker comes to us with UX experience and lessons learned from designing a mobile version of the social party game Wavelength. From Neon Studio, please welcome Kristen Leach.
Hi everyone, I'm Kristen. It's so great to be here. I'm thrilled to be speaking with all of you at Game Depths of Color this year. Um, a little bit about me before we dive in. I have been working as a product designer for over a decade now, and I absolutely love games. One of the reasons why I wanted to speak with all of you today is because I've always been interested in how user experience shows up within games. And there's a little bit of a tension sometimes between creativity and usability that I want to try to talk about with you all today. So let's talk menus. Sounds a little dry, but it's a great place to start when you're thinking about UX or user experience design. So when I was originally writing this talk, I was thinking to myself, okay, this is a pretty obscure topic. But all of a sudden this week, it's the end of August. I checked the internet and people were freaking out about this. The Starfield start menu is the biggest argument in gaming right now. I was personally pretty shocked. And it all started with this pretty judgmental tweet criticizing the design of this start screen. This guy says, the start screen of a game can reveal a lot about how rushed the team was and how much pride they took in their work. Starfield's start screen either shows hasty shipping deadlines by a passionate team overworked or a team that didn't care. This is honestly pretty crappy. And as a game developer myself, I think seeing this was like, oh, it's heartbreaking, right? You don't want to see feedback like this. It's extremely judgmental and making assumptions about a team's creative choices. And honestly, looking at this menu a little bit more closely, it's fair, but it's clean and functional, and the team clearly made some aesthetic choices that they then responded to on Twitter with. And I think what's working well is it's clear, it's easy to use. It's not unlike many other menus, and actually is compared to menu systems in games like Elden Ring, for example, that are still kind of Spartan. They're just black, they have the logo, and then they've got a few menu items. Um, and I think the point I want to make, taking out the stock with all of this, is that you know what? Your menu, it's not your game for the most part. Uh, if your game is great and people love it, people are going to play it, and they're honestly going to probably struggle through whatever frustrating menu you create for them, anyways, because they love the experience that you've made. Um, and ultimately, what this boils down to is the inherent tension between user experience design and art. This happens from time to time, and it totally makes sense. As indie developers, we are always trying to create really great games, but these are massive undertakings, and most indie teams are under resourced for it. And even big studios can struggle, and you can see it come through in some of their games with where to invest more in kind of pioneering novel creative solutions with um, where maybe they could pull back a little bit. So to warm up, let's look at some examples from existing games to find opportunities for what could be a little bit better and maybe what's working really well. First up, Destiny 2. I love this game, but the menu system could really be improved. Personally, I've clocked hundreds of hours so far playing this, but anytime I take an extended break, I pretty much black out and completely forget how to use these. This is just one mega menu of two, by the way. Um, Here's the second one that I'll start looping. Honestly, if you don't know how to use these, you kind of have to have a friend to hold your hand, walk you through how it all works, or you're toast. The big challenge here is that the informational groupings are often not intuitive. There's also tons of different types of patterns, colors, styles, and things shining and catching your attention every which way you look. So not to mention things I'm not even showing here, like you can scroll vertically and horizontally to dig deeper. The information architecture could be so much better. It's complex. It's really hard to wrap your head around. Not great. Up next, let's take a look at an example where the iconography could be improved. So this game is from an incredibly successful indie game creator who is a true inspiration. I will not name this game, but this person is really groundbreaking creative. But sometimes people can be the victims of their own creativity, especially when it comes into play with systems and expected patterns. So looking at the screen, what do these do? What do you all think these icons do? Let's go one by one. So this hand, it turns out that tapping on this, it is tappable, opens an about me or credits page. Why not just write about me or credits or make that a more obvious button? The second one, I love it. I actually love this icon. It's so cute. Little rattlesnake. What do you think this does? I had no idea what this was going to do. You tap it and it actually turns your haptic feedback for the game on or off. Why not just use an icon that people might recognize? This one is a rattling phone from Google's material design system. And lastly, cute little book icon. What does this do? Tapping this actually opens a tooltip that explains each one of these settings that you're seeing here. The tooltips are actually quite short and could have probably been displayed in line since there's tons of room on the screen. Or the creator could have chosen a more consistent, recognizable icon like the little informational eye that you often see with tooltips. All right, let's move to an example that I personally really like. This is Animal Crossing New Horizons, and this is the crafting screen. There's a lot of pretty solid design system choices here to look at. One, there's a really nice standard scroll bar that has an affordance for how to use that on your controller. There's a nice tabular menu with visual icons and highlighted states based on where you are. And these icons are consistent and carried through in multiple places to help you recognize them. All of these cards are actually interactive and have hover states that help you know which one you've selected. And lastly, they're using a really nice standard error color. This type of red is common if you're, filling out a form field and you have a mistake or something's missing. And they're using it here to let you know that you just need one giant clam that you don't have. Great. All right. So all those examples are super helpful. And you might be thinking, oh, yeah, those kind of make sense. But like, how does that have anything to do with UX design? And what is it? Well, UX design is all about solving problems for people. People are at the heart of this work, and you really have to understand who's using your product, what's motivating them, why they might get confused or stuck, and what they might be expecting from your experience. So you can think about UX design as helping solve problems like maybe someone needs to check the weather and see what the forecast is for the day. Or maybe they need to find the most efficient way to get where they're going. Or maybe they want to catch up on the news for the day. All of these examples are probably familiar and they just work. Why? Well, UX design has a deep, deep history and is informed by research, data, and test results. While aesthetic preferences play a role, ultimately what you're trying to do with great UX design is solve problems for people. You want to help them accomplish a task and get it done in a really seamless and intuitive way. And all of this methodology between maybe user research or data analytics and then running tests is super important because as designers, we are often not the end customer or in games. I mean, we're probably playing our own games. But if you think of UX as a practice, most times we're really different from the people that we're actually designing for. And we cannot ever take for granted that we're really similar or can fully represent what our customers need. So all this methodology, if it sounds a little dry, yes, it can be, but you're in luck. There are these huge companies that have done most of this hard work for you. Learning from the well-tested designs that you see in the wild that have shipped from tech companies can actually really help you as a creator take shortcuts where you would really benefit from them. Design systems are actually the perfect place to start. So over the last decade, there has been an explosion in these systems. It has completely changed the way that digital design works and how teams are even structured and how people ramp up and learn how to work in this field. It's really exciting because there's so many examples now that work for all types of platforms, different consoles, different screen sizes, different form factors. So more than ever, there's not really a need to reinvent the wheel. And I think it's also worth calling out that the people playing your games are probably really tech savvy. So what that means is they're going to be actually looking for patterns that they expect and recognize, being, avid consumers of technology. So design systems can really be your friend. Let's walk through a little bit of the history of where these come from to orient ourselves. Design systems have their origins in graphical systems. So here's one many of you will be familiar with. This was created for the New York City subway. It's a real triumph. It's one of the most famous graphic standards manuals. And it brought regularity and structure to a subway system that actually was unifying two different systems at the same time that used to be separate and have different visual systems and patterns, and it was very confusing. Uh, this is a great example of how that type of consistency can actually deliver a ton of very concrete value for people just trying to accomplish something. They're just trying to get to where they need to go. And so moving on from just graphic design and print, let's take a look at the early Wild West of the web. This website is absolutely insane. I love it. The early web was expressive and chaotic and very creative. Sometimes I personally really miss it, but you have to admit that it wasn't intuitive or necessarily obviously usable yet. Apple started to make strides and huge step forwards, releasing the iPhone and pioneering mobile interaction patterns. We take most of these for granted now, but they were extremely groundbreaking. They've also continued to evolve their systems with the human interface guidelines that they create and the new patterns that they stand up with the different operating systems every year. These have really been inspirational to designers thinking about both beautiful systems for consistency, but also improvements to accessibility of products. Google also has famous systems. Material design helps set the stage for consistency around how people create dark modes, think about layer depth and elevation, and even deliver iconography that was easy for anyone to use. Shopify has one, Uber has one, Airbnb has one. These probably are all pretty familiar. In some ways, the rise of these systems is a little sad. Lots of websites and products kind of look like each other these days. They have a lot of similarities. Even when the brand shines through, it can feel like it's converging. But the silver lining is that people really understand how to use these things now. It's making these products and services accessible to more people. They just get it. So these systems are important because they're powerful shortcuts, especially for small teams. Using the precedent in interaction patterns and layouts and visuals that come with these systems mean that you get a lot of intuitive experiences really for free, which means you can invest your extra time into the parts of your game that need more creative firepower, or maybe you need to create a novel new solution for a harder problem that hasn't really been solved yet. Maybe there aren't great examples of how to do it in the world yet. So to be more blunt, I think it is okay to not be creative. Maybe that's somewhat controversial, but I'd really encourage you, when it makes sense, maybe it won't always make sense, just copy the patterns that you see out there. Professional designers are actually constantly looking at each other's work and doing this. They're riffing on what gets shipped, copying, adapting, testing things out on their own terms. You should try it out. Okay, we've talked a little bit about design systems and what UX means. Let's talk about games. Wavelength, shown here, is the app that I designed. Our queue is only 3 people, and we had to be very thoughtful about what we chose to spend our time on. Here's a little bit of background on the game. Wavelength is a big multiplayer party game, really similar to games like Codenames or Jackbox that you might play. You're working together with a team to guess where a clue falls on an analog spectrum. So why did we make this app if it was already a board game? Well, in 2020, when COVID picked up, we started to see people playing remotely. Wavelength started out as the board game that I just showed. And so it was actually, it's a physical device. It was very cumbersome for people to do the jujitsu of trying to show it on their webcam and then hide it and then, give a clue and do all of those gymnastics. So they also started creating these kind of like homegrown websites that you can see on the right. Um, People put a lot of care and effort into trying to play, and this was actually really inspiring and motivating to us. And we wanted to create something that would better serve the game and provide the type of experience that we thought it deserved digitally. So let me tell you a little bit about how gameplay works so you understand what I'm showing later. Here's how you play. As a clue giver, you might see a target like shown here on a spectrum from hot to cold. It's a little on the cold side, so to help get your team to turn the dial to that part of the spectrum, you might give the clue grocery store because it's cold, but it's not the coldest place that you could probably imagine. Um, then you close that so no one else knows where the bullseye is. The team then discusses where they want to turn the dial, and they all have to agree and come to a consensus. This means there's a lot of raucous debate, arguments. It's usually pretty funny. And then once everyone's ready to guess, the target is revealed, and you score points based on how close to that bullseye you got. It's really fun, and I would recommend that you try it. So here's how it all came together in the app. On the left is our title screen. This was adapted from this beautiful box art that we had. We animated it. We added some trippy sound effects. I love how it came together. On the second screen, this is our multiplayer lobby. Because it's a huge party game, you have to invite a lot of people to play with you. And this is the final design. And then on the right is what it looks like when you're entering a lot of clues. So we actually made a change from the board game where instead of waiting between rounds for people to come up with clues, we ask them to provide them in batch up front so that there's not a lot of downtime spent waiting. Once everyone inputs their clues, most of the game, you're looking at this. You're looking at clues, adjusting with your friends where you have a debate and discussion around where you want to put it. Once you come to consensus, the target is revealed and you score points. So one of the things that allowed us to move really fast as a team was investing in a simple design system. So compared to those other examples that I was talking about earlier, this is embarrassing. It's simple. It's extremely limited. I wanted to show it to you because even something as limited as this created a lot of value for us as a team. You can see here, I'm using Google material icons, set up a simple color palette, creating some consistent type styles to use in the app, and then also standardized the way we wanted to handle input fields as well as buttons. And I think it's also worth mentioning, I did not do this at the very beginning of the project. I actually waited until we had done several rounds of prototyping and playtesting because then I knew which components and patterns would be most helpful for me to have on hand as a shortcut. So I knew we were going to need a lot of buttons. I knew we were going to have input fields when people were typing in clues. And I knew because um, it's an app that's based on language that we would need some pretty solid type style. So that's how this all came together. It's very, very basic. All right, let's take a look at how the user experience came together in the multiplayer lobby. This is one of our earliest prototype screens that we used for testing. But the more we tested, the more we realized there was lots of room for improvement. Thinking step by step about how people would arrive at this lobby, there were more questions than answers here, like who's hosting, what packs are we playing, how do I play the game, like what are the rules? How does it get started? What's the best way to join? And how many people max can play? We could do better on all these areas. To lay the foundation, I want to talk about one of the best ways to start thinking like a UX designer. And best place to start is actually just mapping out what are all the little steps people are taking to accomplish something. In the industry, this is called the customer journey map. This gives you a clear picture of who's involved, what they're doing, and what I'm showing here is a simplified version of one of our early maps of how people get to the lobby. There are two different roles here. One is hosting the game and one is playing the game. So we have host and player. So to walk through these steps, the host first would, probably start to try to schedule time to play with a group of friends. Those friends would respond and decide a time to play. When that time comes, the host is going to have to set up that game lobby and invite the friends to join in on that lobby. Once they join the game, everyone's waiting for everyone to get there. After that, then you could start to think about things like tutorial where people learn how to play before starting the gameplay. This is a simplified version, but it's helpful to break down what everyone's doing. And the reason we like to do this is to also understand what are the moments that aren't working well for people, like what's frustrating, what could we ignore, what should we prioritize. And so thinking about how people are approaching these steps, scheduling time to play with the group we know is sometimes a draining or frustrating process. Getting to the moment where you're inviting friends is critical, for us personally, because it makes sure other people can enjoy the game. And then waiting around, not great, right? You're waiting in a kind of boring lobby. It could be better. And then lastly, teaching people how to play for a game like this is pretty complicated because it's a huge multiplayer game. So you're going to have a wide range of experience. Oftentimes, the host is very familiar with the game, trying to advocate for people to play. So they probably already know the rules. There might be some people they're playing with that have never played before, or some people might be quite experienced. So nailing that, very complicated. So here's how we started to think about prioritization of where we should focus our attention on the screen. Because scheduling time to play with a group falls outside of, what we felt we wanted to control as a tiny team. We don't know how responsive your friends are going to be or how difficult it is to wrangle a group. We're going to ignore that. Setting up the game lobby and then also joining the game, those are pretty transactional steps. Those are not necessarily things that are fun or exciting about the game. So the goals for those steps would be to just get it to work as seamlessly and fast as possible. Like I mentioned earlier, inviting friends is critical. Like this is going to make or break whether you play at all and if you have a good time and get everyone happy and in there. If someone shows up and for some reason can't join, it's like heartbreaking if your one friend is excluded. And then lastly, waiting is a big opportunity. That lobby screen originally is dry, could be so much better while people are waiting around for their friends to show up. So to recap, we wanted to focus on hosting, inviting, and waiting. And while the tutorial is super important, I'm actually not going to talk about it today because that would be its own whole talk. And I'm sure you all as game devs can appreciate what I mean when I say that because designing a great tutorial is extremely, extremely hard. So let's look at what hosting the game looks like. Here's the start screen. If you press play, we prioritize joining because most people join instead of host since there's only ever one host. But if you're hosting the game, all you have to add is your name. You open that, it's auto-generating the room code behind the scenes. Then you're selecting the packs that you want to play with, picking and choosing what you think would be most fun for the friends you're inviting. And then you've set up your lobby. From here, you can invite your friends. On this screen, I think it's worth calling out, we use really obvious icons to improve it. So we're using standard share icon as well as an add friend icon. Both of these, if you tap them, open a standard share sheet for both iOS and Android that easily allows you to share this link anywhere you're talking to your friends, whether that's iMessage, Discord, text, anything. And that standard share sheet has a link directly to your lobby. It has a big button in the image that people can press, and that will bring your friends directly into your instance of the game, as you can see here. It just automatically pulls you through. The other thing that we improved here that I mentioned was the waiting room. So when people are waiting around, what am I doing? Well, we heard in playtesting that people were obsessed with these avatars. I mean, I also love them. I absolutely love how they came together art-wise. Uh, they loved them, so we wanted to give them an opportunity to customize them and have fun with them while they were waiting. And this was pretty engaging, and we got great feedback on it. We're also showcasing now on the screen which packs are in play to give you a little teaser for what's to come in the gameplay. But because we had so much great feedback about these avatars, we also added a way for you to like customize and tweak it more to your preferences. So you could open up this menu where you can choose from all the different hairstyles, mouths, eyes, backgrounds to get one that you really love and save it to your profile. All right, so that's the lobby. I want to talk about how UX also extends to bigger challenges like monetization. So design is important here, and you might be thinking monetization is kind of like a business problem. Maybe it's not really related to design. But what's great about the role of user experience design is that we can also help answer questions like, what do people really want to buy? What would they be excited about? And then what's the best way to help them find something and actually purchase it? These questions are foundational to really great e-commerce experiences, and they're just as essential, I think, maybe that's a little of an overstatement, as things like credit card processing. Uh, so I don't think our team 100% nailed this, but I want to talk about the process that we went through so you can see how design can start to help you gain more confidence in how you answer some of those really essential questions that I'm talking about. Um, because monetization is a problem that is very, very important, especially for indie devs that want to set up sustainable ways to continue running and investing in their game. All right, so when we started, we had no idea what people wanted to buy. What should we offer that would be compelling for people to pay any money for? We had no idea. So we started by creating these low fidelity prototypes. They were just concepts. They were essentially like slides or printed pieces of paper with my lightweight ideas. And we brought those to our play testers for feedback. And actually, a lot of the feedback that we heard was that these weren't really resonating. These weren't things people would pay money for. But what was really great about that was that early feedback saved us a lot of time and effort. We didn't, invest engineering or development effort into these things. Here were some of the things we learned. Um, Asynchronous play, when we were trying to think about how we could get people to come more regularly to play this game, wasn't super fun because people love actually talking in real time with their friends and debating and having dumb conversations. It's like one of the most fun things about this game. And then playing every day was way too much. People didn't think that playing a big party game was something they would actually have fun doing every day. It felt like a little bit of a special occasion and group activity. We also didn't really want to limit how often people could play, so we had explored this idea of limiting how many games you could host, but that wasn't in our best interest because we wanted people to play as much as they wanted. And lastly, ideas like unlocking a pro package combine too many concepts for people to understand. So while it seems obvious now, just providing packs of fresh content, in this case, different spectrums to play on, was the thing people most wanted. So what this meant was we had to come back to our customer journey map and think about how the flow would change to accommodate that. Uh, Here, the most important things are browsing and buying, critical to making money, and then also making it really seamless to select packs and create a game. Once someone's bought a pack, we want them to easily be able to use it and not find it cumbersome in any way. These are things that we added at the very end. Even though you saw that in the lobby that I showed earlier, the sneak peek, we had to kind of put this in after we had already designed the game. So with those two focus areas in mind, I started with these are crude, but these quick sketches to really just get some ideas out about how we would modify the flow to make this work. I love doing this as part of my process. I would highly recommend you try it so you don't get bogged down in pixels. Just thinking about steps and like core chunks of content that you want to provide. These were some early prototypes that we created with gifts from the internet to help test art placements and emotion. But you can see here in the customize your game screen, we're using standard cards as well as a border stroke to show something selected with a check mark. On the right, if you were tapping into a pack that you were thinking about buying, you would get a detail view telling you more about what was in it so that hopefully you would be excited to buy it. So this concept of cards is actually really standard in UX design. So I want to show you Peloton as just one example of many. And once you see it, you're not going to be able to unsee it. Cards that open up into detail views are a great way to allow people to browse things visually, but then also dig in where they need more details if they want to be convinced to try something out. So here were the final designs we landed on with the final art in place. You can see that viewing the different packs that you owned, we went with a smaller, more condensed system. And then on the right is the detail view, and we actually condensed how tall those spectrum previews were so that the avatar that you'd also receive with the pack was above the fold. Getting things above the fold is actually like a really important e-commerce 101 type practice, and we're using it here to our advantage to get people excited to buy a pack. Here's an example I want to show from Etsy. You click into a card and you see this cat tree. The most important purchase information for someone is actually a photo to see if they like the item, then the price, and then you can see that the add to cart and Apple Pay buttons are easily within reach of your thumb. It's ergonomic and available to you. It's very prominent. These types of decisions we take for granted now. It seems obvious, but every single tiny thing in that page has been rigorously A/B tested so that it helps people convert, make the purchase, get the information they need to check out. This is all here for you to steal and learn from. And for Wavelength, our analog was to buy the pack or just host the game once you've had it already. So lastly, our learnings around monetization also included that releasing content on a quarterly basis was the right cadence for people, given that they only played kind of like weekly or monthly at most, and that the most diverse sets of spectrums were the most fun, hence why you're not going to see things like a food-specific pack, which didn't provide the type of variety that people really enjoyed. And then want to do a big shout out if you love the avatar art and the pack art. We worked with this wonderful artist, Min Lu, who we just think so highly of. And you can follow her at that Instagram handle here. All right, to recap takeaways, thinking about how you can bring UX best practices to your next game project. Let's go through these. First, map out your journey. This is going to help you make decisions about where you can invest more of your creative energy and time, and help you identify places where maybe your players need more help or might be getting stuck. It'll help you empathize with them. Two, if there are places where you don't need to reinvent the wheel, look for precedent. It'll help you spend more of your time on the really creative parts of your project, and still offer really wonderful intuitive solutions. This is where it's okay to be a little less creative and then also steal patterns that you really like from products or services that you might be using and are inspired by already. And lastly, use your system. You can look at all those design systems that we spoke about earlier. It's a great place to get started, and you can make a little one for yourself to keep your work polished and consistent. It's just a great place to take a little bit of a shortcut and still get a great result. All right, that's all from me. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. I'm so excited to see the rest of the talk at this year's Game Devs of Color Expo, and look forward to talking to you all in the chat.
So many different skills come together when working in user experience, and seeing the full breakdown of Wavelength's development process gives me an even bigger appreciation for the folks who help make our game experiences smoother. Plus, the design of the presentation itself was pretty cool, right? It's kind of nice when you get to show off the skills in the presentation. So, thank you so much for that time and that talk, Kristen.